Garry Kasparov is known to say that every country has its own mafia. But in the case of Russia, the mafia has its own country. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kiev Post. And I also happen to be a researcher that specifically studies Russia during the Putin era. So, how much truth is it to the idea that the Russian state today is simply a mafia? It's a criminal organization. Well, looking back at the historic record, there's some pretty strong arguments to be made that modern Russia has truly developed in ways unlike any other European country. It truly is a mafia empire. So let's take a look back first at Vladimir Putin and his own background. Vladimir Putin was for many years in the KGB. However, upon the collapse of the Soviet Union, he found himself in need of work. And back then, there was a very interesting nexus of Russian history, because it was precisely then that Russia's criminal organizations, the mafia, began to work with the Russian intelligence services and those that had worked in Russia's intelligence services. The mafia wished to expand, try to go globally. And those who had been in the KGB had both the means to help the mafia to expand, but also the ability to offer protection that nobody would get in their way. Since their interests merged, they were able to work together and still work together today to build what is truly a global criminal empire. Putin himself served as an advisor to the then mayor of St. Petersburg, Anatoly Sobchak. It is during this period of time that Putin developed the reputation as being a bribe-taker on a massive scale. But his fortune improved over time from going from St. Petersburg politics to Moscow. Yeltsin at this period, in the late 90s, was already incredibly unpopular. He knew that his presidency was coming to an end, and that there were many people calling for his prosecution, as well as his daughter and son-in-laws, for their illegal activities during his presidency, especially surrounding corruption. Yeltsin signaled to Putin that he was to be trusted with protecting this family, the first family, and that he would be authorized to do absolutely anything he deemed necessary to make sure that they would never face trial. So what happened? Well, when Yeltsin's term was coming to an end, he appointed Putin to become the new prime minister of Russia. Nobody knew who Putin was. The guy had no public image. And it was within a very short period of time that apartments started to explode in Moscow. The Moscow apartment bombings were at the time by Putin blamed on the Chechens, something that allowed Putin to identify an external enemy with whom he had war against in order to provide security to the Russian people. This deception of blowing up apartments in Moscow and blaming it on the Chechens allowed Putin to become a superstar and become central on the national platform. So what's stunning about this? Well, first, the Chechens have always said they had nothing to do with the apartment explosions. But secondly, how the explosions came to a sudden end was that a group of citizens noticed men, dark clothing, going into the basement of their apartment building late one night. Calling the local police, the police found that the men had live explosives, which they were placing into the apartment building. It later came out that the men worked for the FSB. Putin, only weeks before, was himself the director of the FSB. Now, the FSB, of course, said that there was no signs of anything illegal, rather it was simply a training exercise. Quite a strange training exercise to put live explosives into civilian housing without informing anybody. But neither here nor there, Putin had already identified the external enemy. It was the Chechens, which led to Putin's full destruction of Grozny, the capital of Chechnya, as well as a number of systematic attacks he carried out on the region. But why would Putin do this? The answer is simple. He needed something to call the Russian people to him, to make him the center. And sure enough, it guaranteed his ability to win the elections. Vladimir Putin came to power by killing over 300 Russian civilians simply as a tactic to allow him to grow his own popularity and to show himself as somebody who could establish law and order. So just imagine a political leader who willfully kills his own citizens just to boost his popularity. According to David Satter, a well-known American journalist who lived for many years in Moscow, what distinguishes the Putin mafia from, say, Al Capone's was that Al Capone restricted any violence against women and children. In the case of Putin, says Satter, he has a communistic mentality about humans. That is, humans are simply a material, a disposable resource that can be used up and thrown away. They have no intrinsic value. So, if it serves your interest to kill a bunch of civilians just to boost your popularity, there's really nothing wrong with it. It's a very natural thing to do if that's the option given to you. And we see that Putin, though, throughout his life, has had the same sentiment about humans. We see it with the assassinations he's carried out, including with Anna Politkovskaya, who he assassinated in 2006 in her apartment building on his birthday because she had been covering the war in Chechnya. We see the total impunity with which Boris Nemtsov, an opposition leader, was assassinated in 2015, immediately outside the walls of the Kremlin. It is a pretty clear calling card that it was the Kremlin behind the hit. And it advertised total impunity. The Kremlin can kill who they want, and they'll get away with it. Just recently, during the security conference in Munich, Alexei Navalny was also killed. Another Putin foe died, and the international community had the same reaction then as it had about the earlier assassinations. It did nothing. Vladimir Putin operates with impunity because he has seen that Western leaders are afraid to challenge him. And like any bully, the more that he gets away with pushing others around, the more he's going to do it. Putin does not have any intention of stopping until he is stopped. And that's why Russia's invasion of Georgia in 2008 is something that we could have probably predicted. Putin was looking to start a fight already with Georgia, and the start of the Olympics in China that year, on August 8th, 2008, was the exact moment that Putin decided to invade Georgia, a country that Russia still occupies 20% of. Putin stood by his friend Assad in Syria throughout the Syrian civil war, continuing to today, where hundreds of thousands of citizens have died. Putin does this because it's simply in his interest. Putin has a friend in Assad, and he's willing to do whatever is necessary to make sure that he stays in power. The consequence, the loss of human life, doesn't interest him at all. And so when we get to Ukraine in 2014, when the war began, it's perhaps totally unsurprising that Putin is uninterested that his actions are killing incredible sums of Ukrainian civilians, Ukrainian soldiers, and also Russian soldiers. Once again, in Putin's worldview, these people have no intrinsic value. They only exist to serve what is his goals. The impunity for the law is probably the most striking feature of the Putin mafia that distinguishes it from other mafias in the world. One, the mafia cooperates directly with the Russian government. We know that the Russian government cooperates directly with terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah. We see that the Russian state is quite open in its relationship with other dictatorships and its close working relationship with countries like Iran and North Korea, which otherwise are pariah states. But why is it that Putin does things like murder in public someone like Nemtsov, where it's so clear that it was the Kremlin that did it? Well, Putin knows that nobody will push back. Does it because he can do it. So today, when we talk about Russia's red lines, we should remember that Russia has routinely crossed the West's red lines and has realized that the West is unwilling to take actions, or any firm actions at least, to really stop Russia. So, aside from killing people, what else do we see Putin do that acts like a criminal regime? Well, he engages himself in terrorism. Russia did shoot down MH17 over Ukraine, a crime for which Russia has yet to be punished. We know that Putin engages in thievery at a level that's simply eye-watering. According to some estimates, Putin might have around $200 billion sitting hidden away in a bank. How much is that? Well, in relative comparison, Elon Musk is estimated to have about the same amount of cash. The difference is that Elon Musk, in interviews, has said that he is sure that Putin is in fact richer than he is. This means that Putin has stolen the future of his own people, a crime that he knows, should he ever fall, he would be punished for. And it's exactly why Putin will never allow himself to be challenged. He will never allow a risk to come close to him that could truly bring the downfall of his regime. Because if his regime were to fall, he has countless lives that he has taken that are on his conscience, as well as the hundreds of billions that he has stolen or allowed to be stolen from Russia's population. He has stolen the future of Russia due to his own criminal background, his desire to cover it up, and his desire to hide who he really is. A simple thug from St. Petersburg who acts with total impunity towards the law because he knows that nobody is going to challenge him, not domestically and not internationally. And that's why we can be absolutely certain that Vladimir Putin, now with more of a self-image of being a god than ever before, is sure that he can do whatever he wants and get away with it. And that's why if the West wishes to truly stop Putin, they must act and not simply talk about it. Thank you.